Boom. Hello, we have Kyle. Hello, Kyle.
Hey there. Just don't notice I was muted. Sorry about that. Everybody does
No
that,
worries.
right?
Everybody has to make that mistake at least 5 times, or else it's not a valid
Yeah.
live stream, right?
Yeah.
Everybody comes from the land of mute, so
Yeah.
that's just the way it is.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Kyle. We're so glad to have you here, and we're excited to hear straight from you about the launch of OpenSearch. Kyle, let's say that we just ran into each other on the street today.
Yep.
What's the elevator pitch? Why should customers be excited about this today?
Well, so OpenSearch is a brand new open source project that Amazon is spearheading. Basically, OpenSearch is a search and analytics suite derived from Elasticsearch 7.10.2 and Kibana 7.10.2. So if you're familiar with those two products, you will probably know what these things do. So it's really great because this is a brand new thing that we kind of said we're going to do this in January of this year, and it came out at 1.0 on the 12th, and has a really interesting history, and it's a great open source project that's really, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a really cornerstone of so many things across technology.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of open source, I actually want to ask the chat. Hello, chat. Hi. Tell me, is open source important for you? So when you make your business decisions about which platforms, which software, which workloads you're going to be running, is open source important for you? And tell us why. We would like to hear that as well. But a question for you, Kyle. So OpenSearch, amazing, right? But what do I need it for? Why should I use open source? Not open source, OpenSearch. Tell me, I don't know.
Well, first thing I want to address is the fact that whenever I'm talking about OpenSearch, open source always comes out of people's mouth. And that's great, honestly, because they're synonymous in some ways. But the reason you would use it, right, is it's one of these tools that has some really interesting kind of uses. When you think about search, you probably think about going to a website and there's a little search bar at the top and typing tacos then to find all the information about tacos.
Right.
But in reality, that's certainly something you can use OpenSearch for, and it'd do a bang-up job for that. But what it typically is used for, and what we see probably 3/4 of people on the related service, which we'll get to a little bit later, is using it actually for log, trace, and metric data. So taking machine-generated data, stuff like log lines, stuff like measurements coming off of CPUs and fan speeds and all that stuff, piling them all in to a central store, and then being able to use that to kind of on the fly or forensically determine what the heck's going on, right? Like, are things working? Are things not working? It gives you a real insight into all the things that you're running in a typical architecture.
Yeah, and it's basically a place where you can dump a lot of text data and do a lot of search and aggregation, and it's very powerful. There's a question from Ramesh Bachu.
Okay.
Is this OpenSearch a free service for existing customers?
Yeah, so there's a lot to that. Those words mean a whole lot. So first thing to understand things, like I think we should step back and talk about like how OpenSearch came along, right? So and then that'll naturally lead into that question. So OpenSearch came along in January of this year. We had been having, before January this year, we had this project called Open Distro for Elasticsearch. And that is a open source project that took open source Elasticsearch and Kibana and then added all these features and tools around it. That's also what powers Amazon Elasticsearch service, right? So if you are using Amazon Elasticsearch service, you're using Open Distro for Elasticsearch. So January of this year, everybody was happy doing this from our perspective. The company that wrote Elasticsearch, Elastic, decided that they wanted to change their license. They were in the rights to do that, right? But functionally, that meant that there was no open source Elasticsearch or Kibana. And for the project Open Distro for Elasticsearch, we relied on that, and a whole lot of people across the whole industry relied upon that. So going forward from there, the decision was made at Amazon to spearhead an effort to fork the core parts of that, so Elasticsearch and Kibana, and then carry forward the open source development of that their code base, right? So from now forward, there will be a open source option available that there, after the license change, there just wouldn't be any more versions of, right? There would be a proprietary licensed version. So is it going to be free for AWS existing customers? Yes, and, right? Like it'll be free for everybody. You can go and download it today and use it in production. Please do. But for Amazon customers, there will be a name change. Amazon Elasticsearch Service will change its name to Amazon OpenSearch Service, the successor to Amazon Elasticsearch Service. That whole phrase is going to be the name for a period of time. So then you'll be able to choose you'll be able to choose OpenSearch as an option, as an engine for that service. So if you're an existing user and you're happy with what you're using right now, you don't have to choose it. Right. But moving forward, you'll be able to.
Yeah, Kyle, I think you touched on this very briefly, but I think we can pull this apart a bit more for, let's say, an existing customer who has a production workload on Amazon Elasticsearch, which you've said uses the open distro, right? Mm-hmm. First off, can if you can explain just a little bit more about the open distro? I'm curious about what that is and how that came along, and then if you can kind of dive into what customers today can do. I think you said that they can stay on the current solution. They can also migrate. I'd like to hear about those options and what that means for customers.
Right. Sure thing. So, open distro for Elasticsearch. So that was this combination of two things. So basically, it was like a Linux distro. If you're familiar with this, a Linux distro has so much more than the kernel, right? It's got the kernel, and then it's got like a million tools with it, right? And that's what your experience is. Open distro was much like that. So it took the core of Elasticsearch and Kibana, and then added in, lots of these little plugins, right? That would provide things like security, and it would provide things like index management, and some really cool features like anomaly detection, which is like ML-based to see if something goes haywire, if you get an anomaly. And then it added all together, and that was the experience that you had. And if you're a user, that's what you experience right now on Amazon Elasticsearch Service. If you're a current customer, then you're using Open Distro right now, and you have been for quite a while. And that's all open source as well. But now with the advent of OpenSearch, that's going to be where all the future development is going to be going on. So if you are an existing customer and you're on Open Distro 1.13 or 1.12 or 1.0 or whatever you're on, fine, stay with it. You can continue to use it. But now you have the option as well to choose for a new deployment, OpenSearch. And there, of course, will be ways to migrate where you can basically do a live migration. So you start changing nodes around, and you'll get to that. But that's all there. Now, the one thing I should be clear about is you can't do that today. So that's something that's coming out in the coming weeks. We'll be launching 1.0 on the service. But right now, you can start using 1.0, OpenSearch 1.0, as an open source product.
Got it. Okay, so sounds like migration story, definitely something that the team is aware of. I'm sure a lot of customers are going to be excited about. And I just want to make sure I understand what you said with respect to future development. You said that, maybe two questions, sorry. One is, when you talk about migration, like what is the level of compatibility? Because as I understand it, OpenSearch hit the major 1.0 official release milestone back in July, just earlier this month, right? Just 10 days ago. Sorry, I've lost track of time. July 12th is the official release date, I think.
You got
it. At that point, just in terms of where the head versions are, what is the level of compatibility between these two solutions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it's derived from Elasticsearch 7.10.2, and it's wire compatible with Elasticsearch 7.10.2. So, and in fact, later I can show you a demo where I'm using something that's off-the-shelf Elasticsearch compatible, and it just seamlessly works. So there is some nuance there, like there's a few settings that are in it. We're 1.0, and there's some tools out there that do a version check, and they do a naive version check, and they say, oh, you're on Elasticsearch 1.0, you don't use that. Well, we saw that coming, and there's a setting where you can actually change the version to 7.10.2. So your tools will understand what's going on. So version compatibility is there. And as far as migrating, if you're migrating from Elasticsearch or Open Distro for Elasticsearch, it's basically like a version upgrade. which, in fact, a minor version upgrade as far as compatibility. So you can kind of have a mixed cluster and then start migrating from there. And as far as that's for the open source, and then there will be definitely ways for the service to do the traditional migrations between versions.
Awesome. I just want to address a couple of questions here. There's actually a lovely question from. We may get into this later on, so but I want to preface this because we want to address this person as well. So somebody with a very amazing name called Eating Dirt Live says, "Hi Andrew, what data sources can OpenSearch draw from? Is it just S3 or Live or Kinesis, for example?"
That's a great question. It can draw from innumerable sources.
Okay.
So basically anything that can produce a log file, it can ingest. There's a number of tools that you'd use to kind of get it from point A to point B. So yeah, for sure you can ingest lots of stuff and be able to point it at different things and ingest those things. So it's not just limited to AWS services. If you have your own custom service, the integration is pretty simple.
You can technically run OpenSearch anywhere, right? It's
yep.
Okay, yeah. So
yeah,
a great segue. How does one get started with this, right? How do people in the chat, how do people who are interested in OpenSearch get started with this? What is the first thing they need to do?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is to head on over to opensearch.org. That's the website, and I'll be referencing that as well. And if you think so, I mean, I could go ahead and go into a demo if you think this is a good time to do so.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Let's do that. Okay. So
wait.
My screen.
Demo.
Okay.
There we go.
Right. Okay. So I'm at a prompt right now. Like I have Docker running, which is the best way to get your hands dirty, right? So go and get the Docker engine. Got it running on my Mac here. I'm going to go and grab a Docker Compose file. And the Docker Compose file you can get from the website. I'm just going to use curl today.
Okay.
And so I've downloaded the Docker Compose file. And then we're going to do Docker Compose up. So here we go.
You're not spinning it up locally on your Mac, right?
I'm spinning up locally on my Mac. That's right.
Okay.
So this will take a few seconds to do. So we've already attached the different nodes together. And then we're going to see a bunch of log lines here in a few seconds as it starts to load.
Okay.
So basically, we're starting a 3-node cluster up it's a 2-node cluster plus dashboards. So OpenSearch is a distributed search engine, so you're not limited to any node. So we have 2 nodes here, so we got a true cluster running. We're also going to be running OpenSearch dashboards, which is the visualization engine as well. Yeah. So they're all starting up in the same compose, so they can talk to each other seamlessly.
Now, Kyle, while this is starting, a very important question. This kind of brings up to one of the points that Rob made before regarding migration, and a question coming in from Carl Kavilis. Will existing Elasticsearch plugins work, like phonetic analyzers, etc.?
That's a great question. So there has been a lot of effort to migrate plugins. Okay. So if you were to take the plugin binary or the jar file or whatever, it's not going to work because it's going to have different class paths and stuff. The effort to migrate a plugin that you have source code for, it's very it's something that we did a lot of effort on because we have a number of plugins, but the actual depending on the complexity, of course, it should be pretty easy. No different than you would really migrate a plugin from a minor version in Elasticsearch.
Okay, cool. So, excellent.
Yeah. So we're up and running, should be at least. Let's go ahead and swap over to my browser here. So make sure this is running. Loading OpenSearch. Okay. So I'm going to log in. This is OpenSearch dashboards. So if you were used to Kibana, this is what we forked into OpenSearch dashboards. I'm going to log in with the most secure password in the world. It rhymes with radmin. You should change it if you use it in production, for sure. And here we have OpenSearch dashboards. So like I said, we got the 2-node cluster, and then we're running dashboards. So I'm going to go today and add some sample data in. And we'll just add this data in here. This is built right into the interface. So if you were to load this, you'll have the same exact options to do this. It's built right in. And this is going to load some flight data in. So this is data that is it's fake data, but if you had different airports and flights going back and forth and their costs, so on and so forth. So while this loads, we'll talk a little bit about what dashboards is. Okay. Dashboards is a separate entity that is separate entity as far as how it's developed, and it's written in TypeScript and OpenSearch itself is written in JVM languages, so
Okay.
mostly Java, but we have Kotlin and a few other odds and ends.
And-
So all the data is loaded, and
ahead.
we're going to look at a dashboard.
All right.
And we have a dashboard. It's very colorful. And this is a built-in dashboard just as a sample, but it's interactive. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple things. I'll put in Edmonton, the city I live in Canada, and we'll put Montreal in, and maybe Cape Town. So 3 cities, and we're going to use this to create a set of filters. And you see our dashboard has changed. And you can see all sorts of interesting things. These are built-in little widgets that you can build upon with all the kind of pretty flow data that you might see here. It's generating, this kind of tag cloud, stuff that a lot of people will see. But one thing I love about this is it's interactive. So I can go in and click on one of these things, and it will generate the filters for me. So now I'm just saying, show me only Canadian flights. And it goes from there. Now, this is great to show the capabilities of our dashboarding, but let's change gears a little bit and talk about how it might work for logs. So I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to go and use a tool called FluentBit. FluentBit is basically an ingest tool, and it will take a log file and tail it, right? So it'll find the new things that come along to it. So I'm going to copy and paste this over here. And let's just talk for a second what I'm doing. FluentBit is the name of the tool. It's not part of OpenSearch, but it works great. We have a configuration file here, this part here. And then we have a parser set up, and this is just a JSON parser saying, interpret the log lines as JSON, and here's the format that you're getting your dates in. And we're going to import it into the FB index, and that's just what we're calling the FluentBit index. And then we're putting our really secure username and password, and I'm using TLS to do this, but I'm not verifying it since it's local and I don't have a cert on it.
Gotcha. So this is just ingesting data into OpenSearch.
You got it.
Okay.
And then I'm going to, on a separate window that's not on screen, I'm going to just start generating some
some
log
data.
files.
All right.
Yeah. And so this will take a few seconds,
but it's wonderful because it gets this like I wouldn't call it unstructured data, but it gets this blob of data, blob of text. And one thing is to look at logs, and one thing is to look at that data. The other thing is to actually make use of it through the use of dashboards.
You got it. So the thing about this is that if you were just to look at log lines all day long, you'll go crazy. You would go crazy.
Exactly.
And if you're naively putting together 3 nodes or something of your instance or whatever, maybe that's fine. But as you start doing more intensive things, it gets pretty intense to try to look through. Let's say you have hundreds of instances. How do you know where that log is? So looks like we're getting some data in here.
Good. While it's loading, can I just bring a question up here? There's from Shishupal. I'm sorry for butchering your name, sir. Performance. Is there any kind of like performance benefits to OpenSearch? Can we talk about what kind of performance does it have? Is there anything different people should be aware of when it comes to running OpenSearch versus running Elasticsearch?
Yeah, so as far as performance is concerned, they should be pretty equivalent. They're both high performance, right? So if you're used to Elasticsearch, you're going to have the same benefits, and in fact, you might see some increases. We use a more up-to-date library. The library that powers both of these is called Lucene. It's been around for 22 years, and it basically is a more up-to-date version than what you'd probably see in Elasticsearch. Although I don't keep up with those particular ones. So yeah, and looks like we're getting some things in. I did have a couple of little seg faults here on FluentBit. That's not OpenSearch, but
we like seg faults, right? They're always fun to see.
Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and show you this, and we'll see how data is coming in. But one of the cool things about OpenSearch is that it runs SQL as well. So if you're used to SQL, you can use that particular language. So we can see all the different pieces that are coming in here. You can see our OpenSearch dashboards, flight data, and we should be getting some more. Let's see, logs all came in yet. And you would see all the different pieces here. and then you can actually look at different pieces coming in. So the other thing I want to share is just like, we talked a little bit about how easy it was to build that and to show that piece of data, but you can also, of course, take a look and build your own visualizations. So you can certainly take a look at, for example, here's one that's built. This was one of the pieces that you saw before in that visualization. And you can build your own just as easily. So if I was to go to this visualization and create a visualization, I'll create a pie chart. And we have some of this piece here. Now, normally I'm doing this log lines, but it seems like they're not playing along today. So we'll add we'll split this chart, and then I'm going to just select, a term, and we'll get a field here. We can go in and say destination city name, and we just hit update, and we can see we're building these sorts of things. So the key use when you're bringing logs in, a lot of times what you're doing is things like trying to show to somebody visually, instead of like looking at the logs, what's actually happening, right? And this will guide you right through.
The goal is to convert your log files from a bunch of things to something pretty you can show to people. So make
something you can show your boss and say, look, 50% of our errors are coming from this service, and that sort of thing.
And is this dashboard a separate service when it comes to like OpenSearch, or is it like in the same container?
So this is running in 3 different pieces, right? So Docker Compose right now, we have 2 nodes of OpenSearch, and they're just 2 different instances of the same software. And then dashboards is separate. So if you, like, for example, most people will run these. If you didn't need dashboarding, you don't have to run it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Good.
So Kyle, I know you were trying to set up FluentBit to try and insert new events that we were going to query in the dashboard here, if I understand correctly. Now, suppose that those events were coming in and we were successfully telling logs or live events from some production fleet of devices. Once you set up a dashboard like this, would you see that data updated in real time, or can you use this as kind of a monitor, a health check, like, hey, where's my traffic at this time of day?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the cool things. I wish that FluentBit was playing along. It doesn't seem like it is today, but that's probably something that having to do with the fact that I'm running a lot of things, and anyway, my power keeps on going down, and I'm still plugged in, so it's kind of crazy. StreamYard's doing crazy things to me. But if I hit refresh, it would just update. Now, this is stale data, right? So it's not going to do anything here. But it would certainly be able to do it live. But the really cool thing about that is that you can actually use alerting. I don't have any alerts set up, but you can actually have it set up like thresholds, right? So when you see something that's going wrong, it will send you things like Slack messages or an email, or hook into a webhook and do all these individual pieces that will alert you. So you don't have to sit there and hit refresh on this at all times. So maybe you can proactively do some turning it off and back on again.
Got it. Yeah, and I think this takes us back to some of the questions that Darko was asking about in terms of the use cases. You had mentioned how people use this for logging and tracing certain metrics such as CPU fan speed and perhaps disk utilization. And it's clear here now, once you combine that with a feature like alerting, this becomes kind of an operational nerve center for your infrastructure or your various services, right? Now, I'm kind of wondering, what does this mean for, let's say, time series data or analytics use cases? Can you take us through kind of, what are some of the really interesting use cases you've seen where customers have used, maybe not OpenSearch per se because it's so new, but maybe even with OpenSearch, but this space of technologies. What are some of the creative applications you've seen of this?
That's a good question. It's used so widely. I'll bring something up as my personal story here on this. I actually was trying to figure out a situation where I was like, I need to figure out where I want to buy a house. And I was able to plug into open data in my city and find the exact lot that I wanted to use and some of those geospatial features. Not a traditional use of this at all, but like I used this to evaluate every lot that came available and go across all my queries. So I was building these giant queries using actually not OpenSearch, but OpenDistro. So you have that. We have people who are using this for, like security monitoring, like kind of a SIM use case. We have people using it, building it right into their products. We have it powering things like, search in like mail clients. You have people doing all sorts of things. You have places from as simple as like, lawyers' offices using this technology, all the way to the largest industries out there, the largest people in industry using this to take in machine data. We even have people in like a nuclear agency in France that are using this to monitor things that I don't understand.
Yeah, I think the amazing part about this tool right here is that it's not just for you IT people, for us engineers, for us operations folks. If you have some data that you want to throw at a thing and you wanted to produce something reasonable out, it's amazing, right? And it's not just logs, it's not just metrics, it's not your fan speeds and CPU temperatures. It can be anything. And maybe that's a great question for you, Kyle. How do I get my application that's running on a server somewhere that does whatever? How can I get my application to dump data, to add data to OpenSearch? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things I would say is look out there and see what's useful, right? If you have a tool that would take your data in various forms, for example, there's different things that can take like as simple as RSS feeds and then put it directly into OpenSearch without having to code anything.
Yeah.
You should look for those things first. If not, it's pretty easy to talk to it. The great thing is that OpenSearch uses a REST API. If you can send gets, puts, deletes, posts, that sort of thing, it's that plus JSON as the payload, and you're golden. So almost any language, almost any type of thing can output that, can then connect to OpenSearch.
Amazing. And just to take that a little bit further, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the common use case is that Elasticsearch tends to be a backend service, right? Even as a data store. So if you're writing things to it, it's not like you expose that REST API, you hook it right up to API gateway and just let it flap out on the internet. It's more like, you put a service layer in between, you do the authentication and authorization. I believe that there are some extensions and integrations that allow you to do this, but I think there's variations of this kind of architecture. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably not a suggested thing to just like expose 9200, which is the port that OpenSearch communicates on to the world. Probably a bad idea. Although I will say that because OpenSearch has TLS and has authentication, you're in a decent situation, but I still wouldn't advise it. So yeah, it works traditionally as a backend service that you're hooking into to your application directly or through a number of different tools. And then you may have something like OpenSearch dashboards still exposed in somewhat of a walled garden. Also something I wouldn't typically say is a front-end user.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple of questions here in the chat from Patty Englishman. I believe I know this gentleman. I used to work with him. Hello, Patrick. Hi. So can dashboards be embedded into an external site, right? That's a great use case for this kind of a thing, right? Is that possible? Can you take dashboards from here and put them somewhere else?
Well, so I wouldn't put it in an iframe as an example. But there is a couple features here that actually brings up some good information. So there is this idea of reporting. And what reporting does is it allows you to take those kind of elements from the visualizations that I showed you before, and you can put data tables in, and then you can actually have it generate CSVs, but more importantly, PDFs and PNGs. You can either do it on ad hoc at one time or do it on a schedule, right? And then you could embed those into a website or whatever.
Got it.
Right? I don't think I would want. I mean, I showed you how that was interactive and things like that. Probably not the best thing to like allow that interactivity in open querying.
Yeah, but maybe just like an internal website, like something like an internal dashboard aggregator, whatnot, right? So it's possible
For sure.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So one quick follow up. You were showing us, I think, in the query workbench, was it, where you can run SQL, right?
SQL, yeah.
And then we talked a little bit about some of the APIs that are available to insert data into OpenSearch. Let's say, Kyle, I have this crazy idea for a startup. I'm like, Kyle, I'm going to use OpenSearch as my database. I'm just going to store all my data in it. I'm going to query all my data in it. What would your response be to that?
Stop. Don't.
Don't.
I'm a longtime database guy, right?
Okay.
I've been involved with data. I remember in grade 7, I stayed home from school because a database came out, and I wanted to it was DBase 4, right? Like I really wanted to use it, and so coming from that perspective, don't, right? So the thing is, the way this is stored is very particular. The best way to think about this is OpenSearch is a search engine. It's from the search engine family of databases. Yeah. And what that means is its primary function is indexing. So you are indexing data, and that's the thing that it does the best. Storing data, it doesn't. Yeah. But the consistency guarantees, all these pieces would ultimately end up in a situation where you're probably going to have a bad time. It's going to be a bad day if you use this as a primary database. However, there's nothing to say that you couldn't use this as a primary index, and you could have, you have your data that can be re-indexed at a later point. You could use some sort of cheap data store and use this as the way that customers find things one way or another, right? So you could say have S3 or something like that, a flat file that stores all your data, and then here you've indexed it, and then that's what you're building your application around that, and then that's saying, okay, return these document IDs, basically the things that are there, but that actually references something that's going to retrieve from S3.
Got it.
You can point it to a database, right? You can index an existing database somewhere else, right?
Yeah, there's tools that do that for sure. It's not something that's built into this directly, but there are tools that will allow you to do that.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And just to elaborate, kind of the indexing into the thing. If this is where you're going with this, Darko, this is like, let's say we have more than one database.
Absolutely.
Crazy world, right? we're
wow.
more than one database. I've got some DynamoDB over here, we've got some Postgres going on over here, and we want to aggregate data across all that. What's the best way to do that? Is that to put a piece of middleware in front of all three, or is it to kind of have those data sources ingested through OpenSearch?
There's not a preferred way of doing that. Like it's a choice on your part, however you want to do it. And in fact, what you have sometimes is data that doesn't fit into a database. Like I said, sometimes law firms use this type of software because they are ingesting entire legal documents for discovery and weird stuff like that, right? That's not a traditional database, but they want that to also be co-queryable with a database, with things in a database. So you can take all these things and dump them into indexes or indices inside of OpenSearch, and then you can say, find all the instances where it says taco, right? And it might be in a document, it might be in a database record, it might be in a CSV file. And because they're all indexed in one place, you can find it, right? As opposed to doing that. But it could be Dynamo, it could be, an Oracle database, it could be whatever you want.
Yeah, I've got a question from chat that I'm going to put up on screen right now, because I think this is similar, although it's very slightly different than this thread that we're on. AM Grob says, can I get access to indexed data to load elsewhere, i.e. take indexed data from OpenSearch and load it into an ES cluster? And for those of you who don't know, this is none other than Alan Michael, the one, the only, the infamous. Thank you, Alan. Alan Michael.
Alan Michael. Hey, Am. Hey, Am.
Yeah, so basically the way that you do that, so you're saying, can I get access data indexed to load elsewhere? Okay, so not directly. That's not really what it's designed to do, right? So it wouldn't be able to say pull a record from S3 or pull a record from that. You'd have to write that, right? Yeah. But what you would do in that case is you would take the response from OpenSearch, and then you would be able to parse through that response and then retrieve that data from elsewhere. So if you need to do whatever you have there, because OpenSearch doesn't really have an idea of what any type of data might be. It just knows here's some text, Here's maybe some fields in JSON. I'm gonna eat it, and I'm gonna be able to find it later. But to be able to like make a connection where it goes outbound is not something that it's built for.
Okay. Well, thank you. Now, we talk about this being open source, and we talked about the importance of open source, and this being an improvement on something already existing. And we cannot talk about open source without talking about how can actually people contribute to this.
Yeah.
Right? So it's open source. Apparently, hopefully, people can contribute to this as a project. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I just pulled up OpenSearch.org here. That's the website, which is itself open source. But here, the couple things I want to call out here. If you wanted to get started, you want to download this and do the same type of demo that I did with the flight data, you can certainly do that by going to Get Started, and that'll be the downloadable artifacts. But if you want to start contributing, there's a couple things I want to call out here. This button here that says OpenSearch on GitHub is the entire source code. And all the different pieces to it. We have a number of different components to it. And so that'd be a great place to start. Now, if I was to go back and take a look at that, at the bottom, we have a forum. In a footer, you have to find it says forums. Great place to get started, to start talking about maybe what you want to do. But if you want to look at something, if I go to OpenSearch here, this is the main thing, and I just go to issues, good first issue, right? You can go and contribute to it right now. And we would love to accept your pull request. And so there's so many options here. It's a little overwhelming, but great way to get started is just pull this low-hanging fruit or good first issue type of thing from the repo.
Now, Kyle, is that the same place that hosts the dashboard?
It hosts the dashboard. I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, so the dashboard that we were looking at with the visualizations.
No. So that was a local host service that I was running from Docker. So that was at localhost 5601. This is GitHub OpenSearch project.
Oh, sorry. I meant to say, let's say I want to contribute to the dashboard service.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
My mistake. I didn't understand you. If you go to OpenSearch dashboards, that's the actual OpenSearch that you were seeing in all the visualizations.
So yeah, it's basically it's as we talked, it's a separate service within this entire thing. Like when you run Docker Compose, it will launch your OpenSearch and the OpenSearch dashboard separately on separate containers. Now, just I forgot one thing to ask, and when we talk about containers and all this thing, is it highly available, right? Coming from an operations person, can I run this on multiple places at the same time?
Sure. Yeah. There's lots of ways to do this. I mean, of course, being a distributed search engine, you have the options to set up a variety of ways. It's designed to go across multiple different, machines and instances. So you can certainly set this up in a variety of ways to get, whatever you need out of the particular service, right? So there's lots of options there, and that's up to you to configure that. Out of the box, it just says, let's get these to join together as you want. But there's lots of ways you can start manipulating that at the kind of architecture level.
Excellent. Well, Kyle, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Before we take you away, do you have one thing to tell the audience? What should they do now? Where should they go? Can they contact you? Can they go look up a workshop? Whatever.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is OpenSearch.org is the best place to go. I keep on saying that because you'll find me indirectly there. You'll find my Twitter address is on the screen. You can see that. But OpenSearch.org is way more important. But that's the best way to do that. You'll get connected with the community. You'll see our community meetings. We'd love to see you there. We have bi-weekly community meetings. There's a schedule on the site there. So go visit there and start exploring and seeing how you can get involved and how you can start using this.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Well, I certainly learned a lot. I hope you heard some interesting stuff here. OpenSearch.org. Check it out. All right.